There we go. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and open us in a word of prayer, and then we can dive in here to our opening time and get rolling from there. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just commit this evening to you, and we just pray that you might use it in the lives of us as parents, but Lord, the lives of us as families, and we just pray that you would help us to be drawn to your word and just give us wisdom and guidance as we work through the night and just seek to honor you with the evening. And we just thank you for those that have come, and we just pray that you would use this in our homes as families to unite our hearts around the fellowship of Christ and around your word and the blessings that we have in you. And we just pray and ask these things in your name. Amen. All right, so we're underway with this, but there will still be, I'm sure, a lot of changes, a lot of things that maybe progress as we work through this. So if you weren't here last Wednesday, I'm just going to try to run us through. Most of the time, this will be like a touch base time for everybody here. If there's any questions, any things that we need to kind of iron out or walk through some with the lesson. But I'm just going to, again, give us an idea for tonight. I'm going to try to use this PowerPoint every week so that, and there's other ways this may change, but basically to use it to kind of help us as a guide. And again, it's not something everybody has to follow. It won't let me advance, Luke, but if you want to just click that forward. So here's just some ideas. Now, on the night, once they're done out there, we'll get together in our family units. I would say try to, obviously it'll be your immediate family, and then I would say let's try to make the groups in the neighborhood of 6 to 8, but no bigger than 8. And if we have small groups, I think, depending on the size of a family, in that neighborhood. I don't really, 4 to 8 is fine too, but just somewhere in there. And then so some of us, like I said, have come in couples, individuals, just join a family unit. I think it would be best if we try to form groups and then keep some continuity with that group. So, this part's a little bit just unique because there's not really a great way to just put us into, again, most of us will be with our immediate family, but then you'll be joining up with other groups too. So we'll just kind of figure that out here as we get into the next segment. Just find a group, join up, and then try to stay with those if you can. I think that'll build a little bit of familiarity and openness with the teaching, the training, but also the prayer time. What I'd like to do as well is if anybody sends prayer requests, I can make a slide for that as well, and we'll just kind of advance the slides as the night goes. I can just click them forward, and again, they're just going to be a guide. But again, make this time your own. Walk through it as a family. I think the design is to work through the material, but not necessarily to have any one person just teaching and walking through it. If you don't have a book, there's some sitting right back there. So if you haven't picked up one of these are the basis of our material. Here's just some things I would encourage you to do is as you go through this each week, I would write in yours, put, some questions, highlight some things that you maybe want to bring out or draw out with your kids and your children. And again, this is a bit of an adventure. And with those of us who have young kids, it may not be smooth or easy, but it'll be a work in progress. My goal as a dad is to try to engage our kids with as much as possible of it. But again, with the idea that this is really a discipleship tool that I'm trying to familiarize myself with as well. Here are some questions. My goal is to get these out ahead of time too. So going forward, we're going to try to throw these up so that kids could be interacting or working through these. I'm trying to coordinate with Trent as well so that maybe they'll be dealing with a little bit of this in their intro time. But here's some to just ask them even during the teaching time. Get them to talk it through a little bit, walk them through it as a group. So whatever group you're a part of, you can help answer these questions, help the kids, help each other talk through it. Some of these questions can seem very simple, but also can be good for us as adults to even talk through and discuss. And sometimes I want us to think in terms of, it may seem like an obvious answer, but part of the goal of this discipleship time is to get used and familiar. Some of us are not comfortable. We know the answer up here, but we're not comfortable walking through or explaining it to others. And use your group and your family, your discipleship time for that purpose, to walk through things like this. So here's just a few questions that we can generate with our kids during the teaching time. Have them talk through what is salvation, how do you know if you have it, what makes the Bible different from other books. That's kind of where he starts in this. We'll probably, as a goal, again, try to spend about 2 weeks with every lesson, and we may not get through all of this, and that's fine if we don't, but as a general rule, that's probably what we'll try to do. See if there's anything else on the teaching time that I wanted to just mention. Yeah, I think that covers most of it there. So again, this is really going to be up to you and your groups. I just want to provide something so that you have some guidance for this and keeping our kids. I mean, again, my goal is going to be, I don't necessarily want my kids just tuning out. I am going to try to gear it towards, my family, my kids, and engaging them with this material, but I understand that that's going to be difficult for all of us that have little kids as well. You can work through this. I mean, I went ahead and tried to answer this because I plan to use this as my booklet going forward, so I went ahead and answered the questions in here, but the teaching time is not necessarily designed so that we go through and just say, what did you put on this blank? What did you put on this blank? I would say that the goal in all of this is you're going to walk through this. And so what I tried to do was just highlight some things I wanted to touch base on. So like if I found something that I'm like, okay, this could be good to walk through as a group, walk through with their kids, then I tried to single or call that out because, again, the goal is not to take this whole material and on Wednesday night walk through it as a group, step by step, line by line, reading everything together. The goal is, and again, I understand week one, if none of this is prepared, I completely get it. We're really getting into this. But the idea would be that as parents, maybe go through this in preparation for the week ahead. So we will be on salvation again next week. So if you don't have one of these, grab one. And then if you haven't done anything with it, try to work through it for next week. And tonight, if you're just working through it as a group or walking through some of the things that he discusses or touches on, that's totally fine. But that's kind of how I would use that for the teaching time. And then the training time, that'll be the next segment. I, again, provided some options for memorization. And tonight, again, probably very few, if any of us, have come with verses prepared that are memorized. As adults, we may know some of these. Maybe pick a section that you don't. And this may be a little bit of a quieter time in your groups. And on a night like tonight, that's totally fine. Later, when we come, I'm going to try to work through this with our kids. Some of our kids will know these verses already, and so you can work through those. That second one might be more geared towards adults, 7 verses. Those top ones might be more for the kids, but I don't care how you do it, and I don't care if you pick a verse that's not even up there. If there's one that you're working through as a family that you like, that you pinpoint, those are just some suggestions, and we'll try to have those each week for you there. So tonight, you might spend a little bit of time memorizing and working through that. And then the training time, I do have sheets for the kids. It's basically got a verse. It's a coloring sheet if they want to work through that and use that as a filler when you're working through this. I have no problem with that, and we're probably going to try to do things like that, some kind of interactive coloring sheet or activity that they can do as well during the teaching training time. But again, as families, we're going to try to engage them as much as possible in all of this. And then the testimonies will be a little unique too. That's something where as you go through your week, maybe you find ways from the material that you examined that it incorporates to the week that you've had. Maybe it's discussions you've had as a family. Maybe it's a truth, like you could walk through this week and say, was there something this week that were in the past week that reminded you of why you're thankful for salvation or the truths around salvation? He talks not just about salvation in this lesson, but a lot of it is about us and our sin. Where we reminded how much we need Jesus this week from a day we had, a circumstance we went through. There's a whole variety of ways you could take the testimony time to take a truth and bring it into our kids' world, our family's world, the world of our home, where we live, what we do on a given week. And that's really the goal or the objective, is to take a truth and incorporate it into, what we're doing here. So, and then the final time will be prayer. And again, we can do this through a variety of ways, paying attention to the prayer chain, certainly. But what I'd like to do is I might make a third slide. And when it comes to that, if anybody has given me anything or if anybody's posted something on Facebook, I can throw that up on there. And then you can just be mindful of that. When it comes to breaking up from here, which we'll do shortly, I would say my goal is to use any space in here or out there in the foyer. There's chairs where you could just pick up chairs, form your own group. I don't care if any of those chairs out there get moved into groups. You can circle up around one of the pews there. There's sections up here where the stage is at, up here in the front. In any of these pews, I don't care if people sit and just group up together. I don't care if people grab chairs and move into, the entryway or set them up wherever. I don't think it's going to be an issue as far as like people talking all at once in a room. When you're in your group, I don't think that'll be a problem. But trying to basically just use primarily this space and the foyer space out there and just find a spot where your group can meet and circle up for the remainder of the evening. So any questions on what we're doing tonight or what we're going through or how this is going to look or anything like that? Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is, that's another thing. I don't necessarily care how much time you take with all of this. I mean, I would imagine most of us will try to wrap up in the neighborhood of 7:30 every night, but some of it we start late. We may, it may vary or change. So on that, I don't care if groups are not moving together necessarily. If you want to spend 10 minutes on the teaching time or 20 minutes on the teaching time and 10 minutes on the training and 10 minutes in prayer. The other thing I would say about the prayer time too is I would recommend, again, do it however you want. I would recommend even trying to engage the whole family in that as well. I mean, I'm going to try to use it within my family of getting, Ridley, Tinley to each pray, and then every adult as well. I really want to spend it in prayer, having every group getting used to praying together, having everyone in there divide up requests, think of things you can pray, and maybe one night you have a topic for your prayer, whether it's, the missions, your families, your neighborhoods, whatever it might be. But however you want to use that prayer time is up to you guys, but those are some suggestions and thoughts on that as well, just for the sake of, spending it actually praying, lifting up requests that we have here at the church, that you have as a family, that we have as a church body. So any other thoughts, questions, comments? If you want to make any other notes, I'll do this till I see that he's wrapping up in there. If you haven't gone through the lesson, here's just some thoughts, again, that you can write down if you want. Some things that I tried to go through the material and, again, highlight things that would be good for discussion amongst your group even. If you're looking on page 4, speaking about the breaking up of fellowship with God when Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, and thinking through maybe can someone accept salvation without understanding sin or realizing that they're lost, and then asking maybe why not. That's not up there, but thinking through, can someone accept salvation without realizing or acknowledging that they're lost, understanding their sin, why or why not? Some questions to think through there. He talks on the next page there, he talks a little bit about this concept of, if we are born once, we'll die twice. If we're born twice, we'll only die once. That's my paraphrase of some of what he's talking about there as far as spiritual birth and spiritual death versus physical birth and physical death. And he gets into that a little bit there at the bottom with some of these. That's right there in that principle on page 5. You are a sinner both by birth and by choice. And the sin separates us from God. So you can see his progression. I mean, he's starting with this concept of salvation, but having us recognize our lostness. And so there's a lot of things in here that, again, you will highlight different things than I would, or different things that will stand out to you. He talks on page 6 about the truth of eternal damnation is hard for most people to swallow. I think that's an interesting topic for discussion and thinking through as well, that oftentimes that is difficult when we view and talk about that with friends, that this idea that we have a loving God and yet there is many without Christ that will go to a very real place like hell and a very real permanent place like the lake of fire. And again, you may go through this and be reminded of some things that were a little unclear. Maybe you'll learn some things you didn't know before, but again, the whole purpose of a lot of this is really as a discipleship tool. So much of what you see may be review and things that you already are familiar with. On page 10, I just made a note. He talks about you and salvation. He says, the Bible teaches that you will live somewhere forever, either in heaven or the lake of fire. Jesus died to allow you to go to heaven. A good question for our families to think about is that the main or only reason Jesus died? And maybe discussing that a little bit. He talks about 2 simultaneous aspects of receiving Christ and walks through those there on page 10 into page 11. And then you could spend a little bit of time too, I mean, depending on the age ranges of your family and also the group that you're in, there's plenty of things to walk through in these aspects of salvation. you could talk through, the three aspects of salvation with justification, sanctification, and glorification, and saving from the penalty, power, and presence of sin. He gets into a little bit of that with sin and salvation throughout these pages and talks through that all the way through the end of the chapter here. And then here's another thing that I would just highlight. I'm just giving suggestions. Pick up any of this, none of it, however you want to use your time. But he talks then a little bit about, on page 13, about it being a prayer, calling on the name of the Lord. Maybe ask your kids, have them think through, does it have to be a prayer? Is that the only way we can be saved, is to pray a prayer? It's a good thing to think through. There's a lot of things that we deal with that are very familiar to us, like salvation in the church, but maybe helping our kids understand the realities of salvation. And a lot of these, I look at my own life, they were developed much later than 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So there's a lot of truths, a lot of depth here that if we as parents kind of mine through ourselves on a given week, I think we can draw out or highlight. And that's where I think these groups will be a big benefit. We're not all going to look at these things that are very familiar to us the same way. And as a group, you can contribute that. It's very much the discipleship of an entire group, and we're all going to be at different places. We're all going to have been raised in different situations and scenarios. So coming together and trying to share maybe what stuck out to you from this lesson, and that might be another way to spend your time as a group as well. And I understand that on a week like this, we maybe haven't had much prep time. I don't know where everybody's going to be at with that tonight. So, all right. Well, I'm going to imagine he's going to be wrapping up here. So, any final questions, comments, concerns before we break into groups? And like I mentioned, if you came in here a little bit late, we'll try to find groups, pair them up anywhere from 4 to 8 people, and then maybe stay with those over the course of the next several weeks and try to use those as groups. And I would also say, if we can, try to vary it up a little bit by age. I think I'd like to see a good mixture of, in each group where there's maybe a good variety of, I just think that will be fun and interesting for the groups too. So as much as we can, again, I don't have any rules. I didn't want to pick groups for everybody, because it's kind of an awkward thing to decide who are we going to group up with for the next several weeks, and this isn't going to be the easiest thing. It might be rough tonight, and that's okay. I don't know what it's going to go like for every family, but hopefully it's something that we can kind of use as family units, and we'll find to be helpful. So if it's a little rough, don't be discouraged tonight. I think we'll kind of develop some ways. And as you have thoughts and ideas, shoot them to me. Some of you have, and I appreciate that. I've tried to incorporate those things even tonight. That was an idea that somebody gave me about maybe trying to form groups and staying in them a little bit. But I understand there's flexibility. If somebody shows up that hasn't been here and they need a group, I don't care if things change or shake up. None of this is set in stone. I think you guys all understand that and know that. But all right. Well, if there's no questions remaining, then let's go ahead and we will maybe try to start setting up your groups, and then we'll pick up our children and find a spot and kind of get rolling here. We'll have a solid, 35 minutes or beyond, however long your group wants to take, but to work through things tonight.